The year is 1897. The whole world is holding its breath for the next miracle machine, the motor car.
It was a red-letter day when the first auto came to town.
But there's a problem, a fundamental, physics-defying flaw that threatens to turn every joyride into a roadside disaster. You see a mechanic, sweat-soaked, hands blackened with oil and frustration, hammering at a stationary engine.
Step by step from a book of instructions, often learn to start before they learn to stop.
The engine sputters, it coughs, it chokes on its own fuel, and dies. The spark is weak, the timing is a lottery. The ignition system, the very heartbeat of the engine, is a catastrophic joke. Every new engine on the road, from the massive stationary power units to the rickety three-wheeled experimental motor wagons, is a delicate, temperamental bomb. The man who can tame this chaos, who can reliably deliver the one thing that separates a magnificent machine from a pile of inert steel. The spark will not just create a fortune, he will ignite the 20th century. But the man who would do it, a restless, difficult, cosmopolitan German named Robert Bosch, didn't even want the job. He was a free-thinking idealist whose heart belonged to botany and zoology, not the roar of the factory floor. How does an idealist, a man who saw his greatest duty as upholding human dignity, become the ruthless industrialist necessary to conquer a chaos of physics? He was a free-thinking idealist whose heart belonged to botany and zoology, not to the cramped, chaotic workshops of Stuttgart. He had a simple, almost naive watchword that guided his entire life. Never forget your humanity and respect human dignity in your dealings with others. This was his personal code, and also an unshakable core of character. How does a man who was deemed by his teachers to lack the necessary patience and ambition, a man who confessed he muddled his way through school, a man more interested in the quiet logic of nature than the roaring chaos of industry, become the godfather of global engineering? This is the story of the man who invented Bosch. Robert Bosch was born in 1861 in the small, prosperous world of Albeck near Ulm, the 11th of 12 children. His father was the successful innkeeper of the Krone, a man of politically liberal views and broad education. Robert's childhood was not one of hardship but of comfort and intellectual encouragement. Yet, the traditional education system grated against him. He was a knowledge-thirsty boy with wide interests, but he loathed his instructors, describing himself as having muddled his way through the secondary technical school in Ulm. He later admitted that his true preference lay with the quiet, orderly worlds of botany and zoology, and that the ambition required for university simply wasn't there. He followed his father's cautious advice instead, going on an apprenticeship as a precision mechanic. It was a disaster. His first master paid him almost no attention, and Bosch finished his 3 years at age 18 with one overwhelming thought: he had to explore the world. For the next 7 years, Robert Bosch became a ghost in the machine of the new industrial world. He was a restless journeyman, bouncing from one city and one job to the next. He worked for the electrical pioneer C&E Fine in Stuttgart, then a chain factory in Hanau. He even enrolled as a non-registered student at Stuttgart Polytechnic, despite his professed lack of background knowledge. But the most critical time was spent abroad. In 1884, he spent a year in America, working at various companies, including the legendary Edison Machine Works. A year later, he was in England, a journeyman for Siemens Brothers. He wasn't just working, he was absorbing the very DNA of global electrical engineering and early mass production. When he finally returned to his homeland, he had a clear-eyed view of what the future demanded. He was only 25, but he had spent his youth in the world's most advanced workshops. His final judgment on his own career path was definitive. He would much prefer to do business on his own. On November 11, 1886, he rented ground floor rooms in a courtyard entrance building at 75B Rotbühlstrasse in Stuttgart. He described his premises simply: an office, one larger and one smaller workshop, and a room without its own light where the forge was housed. With a technician and an errand boy, his very first associates, Robert Bosch established the Workshop for Precision Mechanics and Electrical Engineering. It was a humble, inauspicious beginning. For months, his main work was servicing and repairing telephone and electrical equipment for local businesses. To fulfill his contracts and save on travel, the young entrepreneur caused something of a stir on the streets of Stuttgart, riding a quick and safe safety bike he had imported from England. This was the quiet before the explosion. The workshop for precision mechanics and electrical engineering was struggling to gain traction, dependent on repair jobs and minor installations. The world of commerce was slow, and Bosch was paying close attention to the nascent motor industry. He knew the internal combustion engine was the future, but it needed a miracle. And by chance, a mechanical engineer walked into his shop one day, asking him to replicate a magneto ignition device he had seen. Bosch had found his problem. He was never the sole genius. Robert Bosch was a passionate entrepreneur and technician, but his greatest strength was leadership. He surrounded himself with brilliant minds, chief among them the engineer Gottlob Honnold. The problem with the existing magneto ignition devices was that they were bulky, unreliable, and designed for stationary engines, not the demanding, vibrating environment of a motor car. The breakthrough came from Honnold's elegant simplicity. Instead of the complex, heavy armature common in the designs of the day, Honnold proposed a smaller, oscillating sleeve inside the magneto. The effect was immediate. The initial low-voltage magneto was installed in an automobile for the first time in 1897. It was a revolution, but it was just the prototype. The true commercial singularity arrived 5 years later. In 1902, Honnold's team developed the Bosch high-voltage magneto ignition system. This was the moment the world shifted. It produced a powerful, reliable spark that finally tamed the motor car, making the company's solution the best automotive ignition device on the market. Drivers, desperate for reliability, were suddenly keen to replace their frustrating systems with the new Bosch design. The courtyard workshop could no longer cope with the demand. The transformation from a small shop to a global enterprise was underway. To ensure prompt supplies, Bosch was forced to think globally almost overnight. In 1898, he set up his first foreign sales office in London. The following year, new offices were established in France and Austria. By 1900, with business exploding across Europe, Robert Bosch was a house owner. He bought an apartment building and proudly announced his plan to build a new factory next door. In 1901, Robert Bosch and his 45 growing number of associates moved into the company's first proper factory building in Stuttgart. The Bosch brand was no longer just a local precision mechanic, it was the name of automotive reliability, and its rocket ride had just begun. As his company grew, Robert Bosch's unique character defined the corporate culture. He was a man capable of both reverence and much offense. He was meticulous and financially tight-fisted, demanding excellence and showing little patience for disorder at the workplace or poor workmanship. Some associates described his rage, saying that at times it was as if a storm raged through the entire place. Yet, he was so respected that he earned the nickname the Godfather. This nickname reflected his radical, socially minded vision. For Robert Bosch, his employees were not wage earners, but associates. He saw it as his solemn duty to provide them with the best possible conditions, both for their work and their lives. He was known for continually investing the company's profits into the latest machines and tools, refusing to ask for high-quality work from outdated benches. After the First World War, with the automotive market in flux, Bosch faced an existential challenge. If the company was to survive, it could not rely solely on the motor industry. In the 1920s and early 1930s, Bosch executed a strategic, high-stakes pivot known as rationalization and diversification. The company went from being an automotive supplier to a full-fledged electrical engineering company. The new wave of innovations cemented their reputation for German engineering excellence. The diesel injection pump, 1927, the hammer drill, power tools, and in 1933, the market launch of the very first Bosch refrigerator. They bought the Junkers gas-fired appliance business in 1932, entering the heating market. They even acquired companies in film, radio, and television technology. Bosch was everywhere. But with global success came the shadow of national politics. When the National Socialists assumed power in Germany in 1933, Robert Bosch was in his early 70s, and his liberal, cosmopolitan views clashed violently with the new regime. In September 1933, he was invited to attend a meeting with German Chancellor Adolf Hitler. Bosch had hoped to find a sympathetic ear for his political concerns, but his hopes were instantly dashed. Bosch returned to Stuttgart deeply repulsed, declaring, "This individual wants to be a statesman and doesn't know what justice is." He tried to insulate his company, which became a haven for some of his associates. In 1941, on his 80th birthday, he purposely tried to avoid the celebration to prevent the National Socialist Labor Front from presenting him with the Pioneer of Labor title. The attempt backfired as the party leader tracked him down just to deliver the unwanted award. Robert Bosch's final years were spent watching his life's work, a creation built on the principles of humanity, trust, and global citizenship, become compromised by the war machine. He died on March 12, 1942, a merciful blessing, as he did not live to witness the destruction of his plants or the full extent of the forced labor used in the final years of the war. Robert Bosch's death in 1942 did not end his company. In many ways, it was merely the beginning of his true and never-ending legacy. During his lifetime, Bosch had worked to secure the future of his company and his ideals. He established the Robert Bosch Hospital and later formalized his social mission by creating a will that secured the foundation of his life's work. Today, the majority shareholder of the Bosch Group is the Robert Bosch Stiftung GmbH, a charitable foundation that carries on his civic initiatives in education and healthcare. This structure ensured that the company, even as it became a massive multinational entity, would be guided by the ethics of its founder, not just the blind pursuit of profit. The leadership that followed him described Robert Bosch's influence not as a strict rulebook, but as a subtler influence, born of his charisma and strength of character. Decades later, company chairman Franz Fehrenbach would articulate this intangible culture by calling it the Bosch DNA, or the Bosch spirit. When asked the secret to the company's innovation, the answer is always the same. We have never stopped looking for even better solutions. This living legacy required adaptation. In the late 1990s, the company formalized its unwritten ethical code, adapting Robert Bosch's values to the modern age. They created what is known as the House of Orientation, a frame of reference that unites all associates worldwide. The principles at the heart of the modern Bosch are the same ones a demanding yet compassionate employer instilled in his first two employees in that small Stuttgart workshop: reliability, a commitment to quality, legality, and above all, respect for different people. Robert Bosch was not perfect. He was a difficult man, rough at the edges. But his plausibility as a role model derives from those flaws as much as his qualities. He was a man people trusted because they knew he kept his word, he walked the talk. The empire he left behind is a great way to understand the idea that the soul of a business does not have to be sacrificed for its scale. The man who preferred the quiet study of botany ultimately engineered the most complex and powerful engine of all. A global corporation built on the simple, forgotten dignity of humanity. Today, the industrial landscape is littered with the scorched earth policies of ruthless titans, CEOs who treat their workforces as disposable overhead, chasing impossible quarterly earnings with a predatory tunnel vision zeal. They are men who define success purely by the magnitude of their personal wealth, even as their companies become hollow, transactional shells, ready to collapse at the first sign of recession. But Robert Bosch's legacy is a defiant standing monument against that philosophy. His creation proves that the most valuable engine is not powered by short-term exploitation, but by long-term, unshakable trust. He created an engine of commercial power, but he built it on the foundation of human trust. Robert Bosch didn't just invent an ignition system, he invented a way to do business that elevated the craft, the product, and the person who made it. Over 130 years later, the world is still trying to catch up. What a wild ride this has been! Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.